Listen closely, because what I'm about to tell you will shatter one of the most dangerous myths that modern women have internalized about their own bodies, their pleasure, and their right to exist as complete sexual beings beyond the gaze, the approval, or the permission of anyone else. This isn't about technique. This isn't about toys or timing or positions. This is about something far more insidious, something I've watched destroy the self-esteem, the relationships, and the mental health of hundreds of brilliant, accomplished women who thought they were doing everything right. Stay with me until the end, because the revelation waiting for you will change how you understand your own autonomy, your nervous system, and what it truly means to reclaim your body after decades of conditioning. And please, right now, subscribe to this channel and tell me in the comments below. Tell me if anyone ever said you were too strong to love. I need to know I'm not alone in what I've witnessed in my practice. The dangerous thing, the truly perilous behavior that I see every single week in my office is not what you're doing with your hands or what device you've chosen or whether you're thinking about that one person from your past. The dangerous thing is the shame you carry while you do it, the self-judgment, the voice in your head that whispers you're too old for this, that respectable women don't need this, that if you were truly satisfied in your relationship, you wouldn't be here, alone, seeking something your partner should be providing. That voice, clinical, cold, condemning, is what's destroying you, not the act itself, but the internal narrative of inadequacy and guilt that accompanies it. I'm Dr. Valeria Montes, and I've spent 2 decades listening to women describe their relationship with their own bodies as if they were confessing crimes. Women in their 40s, 50s, 60s, accomplished professionals, devoted mothers, loyal partners, sitting across from me with their hands folded in their laps, speaking in hushed tones about something as natural and necessary as sleep. And what I've learned is this. The danger isn't in masturbation. The danger is in the internalized belief that your pleasure is somehow conditional, that it requires justification, that it exists only in service to someone else's desire, that it marks you as deficient if you need it despite having a partner, or pathetic if you seek it while single. Your nervous system doesn't lie. When you approach your own body with shame, with urgency born from guilt rather than genuine desire, with the frantic energy of someone stealing something that doesn't belong to them, your body registers threat. Your sympathetic nervous system activates. Cortisol floods your bloodstream. What should be an act of self-care, of reconnection, of coming home to yourself, becomes another source of stress. Another item on the invisible list of things you're doing wrong. Another piece of evidence in the case you're building against yourself. Maria came to me at 52, divorced 3 years, successful architect, 2 adult children who adored her, a life that looked from the outside like a triumph of resilience. But she sat in my office with dark circles under her eyes and told me she couldn't sleep. When I asked about her self-care routines, she listed exercise, nutrition, meditation, therapy. When I asked specifically about her sexual wellness, she looked at me as if I'd asked her to confess to murder. "I shouldn't need that anymore," she said. "I'm past that phase of life." Here's what I told Maria, and what I'm telling you now. There is no phase of life in which your body stops deserving pleasure, comfort, and the neurochemical benefits of orgasm. None. The belief that sexual desire has an expiration date or that self-pleasure is somehow an admission of failure is not medicine. It's misogyny dressed up as maturity. The oxytocin released during orgasm doesn't check your relationship status before it bonds neural pathways that reduce anxiety. The dopamine doesn't ask whether you're single or partnered before it regulates your mood. The prolactin doesn't verify your age before it helps you sleep. Your endocrine system doesn't care about your internal narrative. It cares about homeostasis. It cares about regulation. It cares about giving your body what it needs to function. But shame interferes with all of it. Shame keeps you from approaching your own body with the tenderness and attention it deserves. Shame makes you rush, makes you dissociate, makes you treat the experience like a transaction rather than an act of self-intimacy, and your nervous system, exquisitely attuned to your emotional state, responds accordingly. Instead of relaxation, you get vigilance. Instead of release, you get tension that lingers long after you've finished. I want you to understand the neuroscience here because it matters. When you engage in sexual activity, with a partner or alone, while experiencing shame, your amygdala activates. This is your threat detection center. It's designed to keep you safe from danger. And if you've spent years, decades even, internalizing the message that your sexuality is dangerous, inappropriate, excessive, or wrong, then the very act of pleasure triggers a stress response. You're literally fighting your own nervous system while trying to experience something that should calm it. The women who walk into my office are so tired. Tired from performing, tired from people-pleasing, tired from managing everyone else's emotions while neglecting their own. And when I ask them when they last did something solely for their own pleasure, with no audience, no performance, no goal beyond their own satisfaction, they look at me blankly. Because they've been taught that their pleasure matters only insofar as it serves someone else, that it's valid only when it's desired by another person, that seeking it alone is somehow an admission that they're not enough, or that they're too much, or that they've failed at the fundamental task of being a woman, which is apparently to be endlessly available and never inconveniently hungry for anything. Let me be clear about something. The capacity to give yourself pleasure, to know your own body well enough to bring yourself satisfaction, to exist as a complete sexual being independent of another person's participation. This isn't a consolation prize for being single. It's not a stopgap measure until you find the right partner. It's a foundational aspect of emotional and physical health. It's self-knowledge. It's autonomy. It's the lived experience of understanding that your body belongs to you and responds to you and deserves care from you. The dangerous thing you're doing when you masturbate is apologizing for it, internally minimizing it, treating it like a shameful necessity rather than an act of profound self-respect. You're reinforcing a neural pathway that says your pleasure is conditional, negotiable, something to be justified rather than celebrated. And every time you do that, you're training your nervous system to associate vulnerability and pleasure with danger and judgment. Think about the language we use. We say taking care of business, or scratching an itch, or relieving tension. All of these phrases frame masturbation as maintenance, as something mechanical and utilitarian, stripped of intimacy or meaning. But you would never describe making love to someone you cherish in those terms. You wouldn't reduce it to plumbing. Yet when it comes to your own body, you're conditioned to see it as exactly that, a biological function to be managed efficiently and without emotional investment. This matters more than you might think, because how you treat yourself in private becomes the template for how you allow others to treat you. If you can't approach your own body with reverence, with patience, with genuine curiosity about what brings you joy, how can you possibly demand that from a partner? If you're performing even when you're alone, rushing through it, focusing on efficiency rather than experience, feeling guilty the entire time, then you're teaching yourself that your pleasure is an inconvenience, even to you. Rebecca, 57, told me something I'll never forget. She'd been married for 30 years to a man who treated sex like a scheduled maintenance appointment. Every Saturday night, same routine, his satisfaction guaranteed, hers optional. She'd internalized this so completely that even after he left her for someone younger, even alone in her own bed with no one watching, she still couldn't allow herself to take time, to explore, to linger. She approached her own body with the same efficient indifference her husband had shown. She'd been trained so well that she didn't need him there to continue the pattern of neglect. We spent months working on this, not on her sexuality per se, but on her capacity for self-tenderness, on her ability to slow down, on her willingness to believe that her pleasure, not as a means to an end, not as a performance, but as an experience valuable in itself, was worth her time and attention. The breakthrough came when she stopped using the word masturbate entirely. It carried too much baggage, too many associations with shame and secrecy, and something vaguely pathetic. Instead, she started thinking of it as spending time with myself. And that small linguistic shift changed everything. Because when you're spending time with yourself, you're not in a hurry, you're not apologizing, you're not performing, you're simply present. This is what I mean when I talk about danger. The real risk isn't that you're touching your own body. The real risk is that you've forgotten how to be present in your own body. You've learned to dissociate from it, to treat it as an object rather than the home you live in. And dissociation, chronic disconnection from your own physical experience, is one of the most reliable predictors of anxiety, depression, and relationship dysfunction I know. Your body keeps score. This isn't metaphor. This is neuroscience. Your nervous system stores every experience, every message, every moment of shame or safety. When you approach yourself with judgment, your body remembers. When you rush through intimacy with yourself because you've internalized the belief that your pleasure is selfish or excessive, your body remembers. And these memories accumulate, shaping your capacity for presence, for vulnerability, for genuine connection both with yourself and with others. The women I work with often tell me they feel broken. They've tried everything: therapy, medication, couples counseling, books on rekindling desire. But they've never addressed the fundamental rupture in their relationship with themselves. They've never questioned the assumption that their sexuality is something to be managed, controlled, justified, or apologized for, rather than experienced, honored, and integrated into their sense of self. Let me tell you what happened with Patricia, 63, who came to me convinced she was done with all of this. Menopause had been brutal. Her marriage had ended badly. She'd raised 3 children and built a career and survived breast cancer, and she told me she'd earned the right to be done with desire, done with the messiness of bodies and needs and wanting. She said it with such finality, such relief, as if she'd finally been released from some exhausting obligation. But she wasn't sleeping well. She was irritable, snapping at her grandchildren, withdrawing from friends. She felt disconnected from everything, like she was watching her life through glass. Depression, obviously, but also something else, a kind of resignation, a sense that the best parts of life were behind her and all that remained was managing decline with as much dignity as possible. We talked about many things: loss, identity, the terror of irrelevance in a culture that worships youth, but we also talked about pleasure, not as sexuality necessarily, but as a willingness to inhabit your body fully, to remain connected to physical sensation, to allow yourself to feel good in a world that gives you ample reason to feel terrible. I suggested, very gently, that perhaps her exhaustion came not from desire itself, but from decades of managing desire according to someone else's schedule, someone else's preferences, someone else's definition of appropriate. That perhaps she was tired not of pleasure, but of performance. And that maybe, just maybe, learning to touch herself with genuine curiosity, with no agenda beyond her own comfort and satisfaction, might be a radical act of reclaiming her body as her own. She looked at me like I'd suggested she take up skydiving, but she was desperate enough to try. 3 months later, she came back. She looked different, rested, present. She told me she'd started slowly, just lying in bed and noticing sensation without any goal, noticing what felt good, not sexually necessarily, but physically, the warmth of blankets, the softness of her skin, the way her body relaxed when she breathed deeply instead of shallowly. Gradually, she'd allowed herself to explore, to remember that her body could feel pleasure, that she could be the source of that pleasure, that she didn't need permission or a partner or a reason beyond her own desire. And something had shifted, not just in her sexuality, but in her entire relationship with herself. She felt more grounded, more present, less afraid, because she'd proven to herself that she could tend to her own needs, that her body still responded, that she was still fully alive. This is what I'm talking about when I say the danger isn't in the act, it's in the shame. Patricia's isolation, her depression, her sense of being finished, These weren't caused by menopause or aging or her failed marriage. They were caused by decades of disconnection from her own body, decades of treating her own needs as secondary, decades of believing that her value lay in her utility to others rather than in her own existence. The science supports this, by the way. Studies on women's sexual satisfaction consistently show that women who masturbate regularly report higher levels of overall life satisfaction, better sleep, lower anxiety, and more satisfying partnered sex when they choose to engage in it. Not because masturbation is some magic cure, but because women who make space for their own pleasure have practiced self-advocacy. They've practiced paying attention to their own bodies. They've practiced asking for what they want and believing they deserve to receive it. Conversely, women who report high levels of shame around masturbation also report higher levels of sexual dysfunction with partners, more difficulty with arousal and orgasm, and significantly higher rates of anxiety and depression. Because shame doesn't stay contained. You can't compartmentalize it. If you shame yourself for wanting pleasure alone, you'll shame yourself for wanting it with a partner too. If you can't be vulnerable with yourself, you can't be vulnerable with anyone. Here's where this gets even more interesting from a neurological standpoint. The pathways in your brain that process self-judgment and the pathways that process pleasure are intimately connected. When you activate shame circuits while simultaneously trying to activate pleasure circuits, you create a kind of neurological interference pattern. Your brain literally can't fully experience pleasure while it's simultaneously producing narratives of inadequacy and wrongness. It's like trying to accelerate and brake at the same time. You don't go anywhere, you just wear out your system. This is why mindfulness practices around sexuality are so powerful. Not because they make you better at sex, but because they train your brain to stay present with physical sensation without immediately jumping to judgment, narrative, or meaning-making. They help you tolerate pleasure without needing to explain it, or justify it, or perform it for an imagined audience. Many of the women I work with are so accustomed to performing, even in their own heads, that they narrate their own experience while it's happening. They're watching themselves, evaluating themselves, wondering if they're doing it right, worrying about how long it's taking, concerned that they're broken because they need fantasy or touch or time. They're so busy managing the experience that they're not having the experience. And this, more than anything else, is what I want you to understand. The most dangerous thing you can do when you masturbate is to not be there. To go through the motions while your mind is somewhere else, planning tomorrow's meetings or replaying yesterday's arguments or judging yourself for needing this in the first place. Because when you're not present, you're reinforcing the pattern of disconnection that causes so much suffering in every other area of your life. The capacity to be fully present in your body, especially during vulnerable moments, is a skill. It's not something you're born with, it's something you practice. And for many women, the safest place to practice is alone, where there's no performance pressure, no risk of judgment, no need to manage someone else's experience while neglecting your own. Let me introduce you to Diana, 48, who'd spent her entire adult life in relationships. She'd gone from her parents' house to college to living with her first serious boyfriend, to marriage to divorce to immediately moving in with someone new. She'd never, not once in 30 years, spent more than a few months alone, and she was terrified of it. When her second marriage ended, she called me in a panic. She couldn't sleep in her own bed, couldn't stand the silence, couldn't tolerate being alone with herself, and when I asked her why, she said something that broke my heart. I don't know how to be with me. I don't know what to do with myself when nobody's watching. We started with the basics. I asked her to spend 10 minutes a day simply lying in bed, eyes closed, noticing her breath. Just that. No agenda, no goal, just presence. She found it excruciating. Her mind raced. She felt anxious, exposed, like she was doing something wrong by simply existing without purpose or audience. Gradually, over weeks, she began to tolerate stillness. And then something interesting happened. She started noticing sensations she'd been ignoring for years: tension in her shoulders, a chronic ache in her lower back, the way her breath was always shallow, as if she were perpetually bracing for impact. I suggested she begin exploring what helped those sensations ease: stretching, massage, warm baths, permission to notice what felt good and do more of it. And eventually, carefully, we expanded that exploration to include her whole body, not as a sexual practice initially, but as a practice of attentiveness and care. Diana discovered that she'd been treating her body like a machine that existed to perform tasks and please people. She'd never considered that it might have needs and preferences of its own, that it might enjoy certain touches, certain rhythms, certain kinds of attention. She'd been living in her body like a stranger in a hotel room, grateful for the shelter but uninterested in making it home. Learning to touch herself with genuine curiosity changed everything. Not because it made her better at sex, though it did, but because it gave her back to herself. It taught her that she was worth her own attention, her own tenderness, her own time. That she didn't need to be in service to anyone to justify her existence. That pleasure, her pleasure, was valuable in itself. This is the heart of what I'm trying to tell you. The danger isn't in masturbation. The danger is in the belief system that says you're only valuable when you're useful to others, that your needs are negotiable, that your pleasure is selfish, that your body is a tool rather than a home, that aging means accepting decline and disconnection rather than claiming a different, deeper kind of embodiment. The women who walk into my office are drowning in exhaustion, not because they're doing too much, but because they've been doing everything except taking care of themselves. They've been performing competence, performing selflessness, performing strength, and underneath all that performance is a terrified woman who believes that if she stops producing, stops giving, stops being useful, she'll be abandoned. And masturbation, this supposedly shameful private act, becomes the front line of a much larger battle, because if you can't give yourself permission to feel good in your own body, alone, with no one watching, how can you possibly advocate for yourself in any other context? If you can't even acknowledge your own needs in the privacy of your own bedroom, how will you ever name them in a relationship, in a workplace, in the world? The shame around female sexuality, and especially around female self-pleasure, isn't accidental. It's structural. It serves a purpose, because women who don't believe they deserve pleasure are easier to exploit, easier to manipulate, easier to keep small. Women who think their sexuality exists only in response to male desire never develop a felt sense of their own agency. Women who feel guilty about wanting what they want learn to settle for less than they need. This is why I'm so insistent about this. Not because I think masturbation is the answer to everything. It's not. But because the shame you carry into that private moment reflects a much larger rupture in your relationship with yourself, and healing that rupture, learning to approach your own body with respect and curiosity and kindness, ripples out into every other area of your life. Linda came to me at 55 in the aftermath of a devastating betrayal. Her husband of 25 years had been having an affair. When she confronted him, he told her she'd become too much work. She wasn't spontaneous anymore. She wanted to talk about feelings. She'd gained weight. She didn't initiate sex. The implication was clear. She'd failed at her primary job, which was keeping him satisfied, and therefore his infidelity was fundamentally her fault. She'd internalized this completely. She came to me wanting to know how to be better, more desirable, more spontaneous, less needy, how to become the woman he wanted so he'd come back. She was prepared to perform a complete personality transplant if that's what it took. I asked her a simple question. When was the last time you did something solely because it brought you joy, with no consideration for how it might affect him or anyone else? She couldn't answer. Every choice she made, every moment of her day, was filtered through the question of whether it made her a good wife, a good mother, a good woman. She'd lost track of what she actually wanted, what actually brought her pleasure, separate from her utility to others. We didn't start with her marriage. We started with her relationship with herself. I asked her to spend time each day doing something that felt good to her body, whatever that meant. Walking, dancing in her living room, taking long baths, and yes, exploring her own body without agenda or goal, just noticing what felt good. At first, she resisted. She said it felt selfish. She said she didn't have time. She said it felt wrong to prioritize her own pleasure when her marriage was falling apart. But I pushed back. I told her that her marriage was falling apart precisely because she'd abandoned herself years ago, and no amount of performing what her husband wanted would fix that fundamental betrayal. Gradually, she began to practice presence with herself, and what she discovered was rage, decades of suppressed anger at being treated like her needs didn't matter, like her pleasure was optional, like her value was tied exclusively to her ability to make other people comfortable. That rage was uncomfortable. It disrupted her carefully constructed identity as the accommodating wife, the woman who never complained, the one who held everything together. But it was also liberating. Because underneath the rage was a person, a full, complex, desiring person who'd been buried under years of performance and self-denial. Learning to touch herself, to pursue her own pleasure without apology, became a kind of declaration of independence. Not from relationship, she eventually found a partner who actually saw her and valued her, but from the belief that her sexuality existed in service to someone else's ego. She learned that her body was hers, that her pleasure mattered, that she could want what she wanted without needing permission or validation. This is what I mean by dangerous. The most dangerous thing you do when you masturbate is carry the voice of every person who ever made you feel that your desire was too much, too little, inappropriate, or wrong. That voice, internalized and persistent, is what destroys you. Not the act itself, but the self-judgment that accompanies it. Your nervous system is designed to respond to pleasure. Orgasm releases oxytocin, which bonds, connects, calms. It releases dopamine, which regulates mood and motivation. It releases endorphins, which reduce pain and stress. It activates your parasympathetic nervous system, which is responsible for rest and repair. All of this happens regardless of whether you're partnered or single, young or old, supposed to be sexual or not. But shame disrupts this process. Shame activates your sympathetic nervous system, your fight-or-flight response. When you approach your body with shame, you're essentially telling your nervous system that pleasure is dangerous. And your body, exquisitely designed to keep you safe, responds by shutting down the very systems that would allow you to experience satisfaction. This is why women who struggle with shame around sexuality often also struggle with arousal, with orgasm, with desire itself, not because there's something physiologically wrong, but because their nervous system has learned that pleasure is a threat, and threats must be defended against. The solution isn't better technique or new equipment or a more adventurous mindset. The solution is nervous system regulation. It's learning to approach your body as safe, worthy, deserving of care. It's dismantling the belief systems that taught you to fear your own desire. This takes time. It takes practice. It takes a willingness to notice the judgmental thoughts that arise. I'm too old for this. I should be past this. If I were satisfied with my partner, I wouldn't need this. Good women don't do this. And recognize them as learned beliefs, not truths. Cultural conditioning, not medical fact. One of the most powerful interventions I use with clients is to ask them to identify where these beliefs came from. Who first taught you that your sexuality was something to be controlled rather than expressed? Who benefited from your shame? What messages did you receive about female desire, female bodies, female pleasure? And then, perhaps most importantly, do you still believe those messages serve you? For most women, the answer is a resounding no. These beliefs don't serve them. They serve a system that benefits when women are disconnected from their own power, their own agency, their own pleasure. A system that prefers women exhausted, compliant, grateful for whatever scraps of attention they receive, but acknowledging that these beliefs are harmful and actually changing them are two different things. Because these beliefs are wired into your nervous system through repetition and reinforcement. Every time you shamed yourself for wanting too much, or needing too much, or being too much, you strengthened those neural pathways. Every time you suppressed your desire to keep someone else comfortable, you taught your body that your needs don't matter. Rewiring takes conscious, consistent practice. It means approaching your body repeatedly with compassion instead of criticism. It means noticing when shame arises and choosing a different response. It means building new neural pathways that say, my body deserves pleasure. My needs are legitimate. My desire is not a problem to be solved, but an aspect of being fully alive. This is why I'm so passionate about this work. Because I've seen what happens when women reclaim their bodies, not just their sexuality, but their entire sense of agency and selfhood. They stop tolerating bad behavior from partners. They stop accepting jobs that underpay and undervalue them. They stop saying yes when they mean no. They stop abandoning themselves to make other people comfortable. Because once you've practiced advocating for your own pleasure in the privacy of your bedroom, once you've proven to yourself that your needs matter and that you can meet them, once you've experienced what it feels like to be fully present in your body without shame or apology, you can't unknow that. You can't go back to performing helplessness or gratitude for basic respect. This is why this work is dangerous to systems of oppression, not because female sexuality is inherently disruptive, but because women who know their own bodies, who trust their own pleasure, who believe they deserve satisfaction, these women are much harder to control. Consider the language we use around female sexuality. Women give in. We let men have sex with us. We allow intimacy. We're modest or pure or virtuous when we suppress desire, loose or easy or too much when we express it. All of this language frames female sexuality as passive, reactive, something that happens to us rather than something we actively want and pursue. But masturbation disrupts this narrative entirely. You can't give in when you're alone. There's no one to let or allow. You're just a person in your body pursuing pleasure because you want to. It's active. It's agentic. It's yours. And that terrifies people who benefit from women's passivity, which is why you were taught to feel shame about it, why it's hidden, whispered about, treated as slightly pathetic or desperate or something you grow out of when you find the right partner. But here's the truth. Women who masturbate regularly, who know their bodies and feel comfortable pursuing their own pleasure, have better sex lives with partners. Not worse, better. Because they know what they like. They can communicate what they need. They don't rely on a partner to magically intuit what brings them satisfaction. They take responsibility for their own pleasure while remaining open to shared pleasure. This is maturity. This is health. This is what secure attachment looks like. The capacity to self-soothe, self-regulate, meet your own needs while also being available for genuine connection with others. The women who struggle most in relationships are often those who've never developed this capacity. They look to partners to provide everything: validation, pleasure, emotional regulation, a sense of worthiness. And when partners inevitably fail to meet all those needs, these women feel betrayed, abandoned, confirmed in their worst fear that they're unlovable. But if you can meet some of your own needs, if you can comfort yourself, pleasure yourself, spend time with yourself without falling apart, then partnership becomes a choice rather than a desperate necessity. You engage from overflow rather than depletion. You choose people who enhance your life rather than clinging to anyone who offers temporary relief from your own self-rejection. This is what I want for you. Not better orgasms, though that's a nice bonus, but a fundamentally different relationship with yourself. One based on respect, curiosity, and care rather than judgment. Performance and shame. The work begins in the small, private moments. When you're alone in your body and you notice a desire arising, what happens next? Do you immediately judge it? Do you tell yourself you shouldn't want this, you're too old for this, you should be satisfied with what you have? Or do you pause, breathe, and allow yourself to be curious about what your body is asking for? This pause, this moment of choosing curiosity over judgment, is where transformation begins. It's not dramatic, it's not Instagram-worthy, but it's profound. Because in that moment, you're interrupting decades of conditioning. You're choosing to believe that your body's wisdom matters more than cultural scripts about appropriate female behavior. And the more you practice this, the more natural it becomes. Not just with sexuality, but with everything. You start noticing all the ways you deny yourself, all the times you say, "I'm fine," when you're not, all the moments you suppress your needs to keep other people comfortable, and you start wondering, what would happen if I stopped doing that? What would happen if I trusted myself? What would happen if I pursued what I wanted without apology? The women I've worked with who've made this shift describe it as coming home. After years of searching for validation and satisfaction outside themselves, they discover that everything they needed was always available. Not because they don't need connection, humans are wired for relationship, but because they learn that connection is only possible when you're connected to yourself first. Sarah, 61, said it beautifully. "I spent 40 years trying to be the woman everyone wanted me to be. Good daughter, good wife, good mother. I performed so well that I forgot I was performing, and then my husband died, and suddenly there was no one left to perform for, and I realized I had no idea who I was. Learning to be alone with myself, to touch myself without shame, to pursue my own pleasure. It sounds so small, but it saved my life. Because it taught me I was real, not just a reflection of other people's needs, but an actual person with desires and preferences and the right to take up space. This is what's at stake, not your sex life, though that matters, but your sense of self. Your capacity to exist as a full person rather than a supporting character in everyone else's story. Your right to pursue satisfaction without needing permission or validation from anyone. The danger isn't in masturbation. The danger is in believing you don't deserve it. The danger is in carrying shame about something so fundamentally human that nearly everyone does it, but almost no one talks about it honestly. The danger is in learning to fear your own desire, to see your needs as problems, to treat your body as if it belongs to everyone except you. So here's what I want you to do this week. I want you to spend time with yourself, alone, private, no agenda, and practice presence, not performance, not efficiency, not trying to achieve anything. Just notice what your body feels like. Notice where you hold tension. Notice what feels good. Notice what you want without immediately judging whether that wanting is appropriate or justified or reasonable. And when shame arises, because it will, I want you to notice that too. Notice the thoughts, the judgments, the voice that tells you you're doing something wrong. And instead of believing that voice, I want you to get curious about it. Where did it come from? Who does it sound like? Does it serve you, or does it serve a system that benefits from your disconnection from your own power? You don't have to fix anything. You don't have to overcome anything. You just have to practice being present with yourself, in your body, without apology, and notice what shifts. Because here's what I know from 20 years of practice. Women who reclaim their bodies reclaim their lives. They stop settling. They stop performing. They stop abandoning themselves to avoid conflict or maintain connection. They become unshakable, not because nothing hurts them, but because they've learned they can survive hurt without fragmenting, because they've practiced staying present even when it's uncomfortable, because they've proven to themselves that they are worthy of their own attention, care, and pleasure. That's what I want for you. Not perfection, not fearlessness, not some idealized version of empowered femininity. I want you grounded, present, and unapologetic about taking up space in your own life. I want you to know, in your bones, that your pleasure matters. Your needs are legitimate, and your body deserves to be treated with tenderness and respect. By others, yes, but most importantly, by you. So subscribe to this channel if this resonates. Comment below and tell me, has anyone ever told you that you are too strong to love? Too much? Too intense? Too needy? Because I want you to know that those accusations say everything about the person making them and nothing about you. And I want you to share this with any woman in your life who needs to hear that her desire is not a disease, her needs are not a burden, and her pleasure is not contingent on anyone else's approval. You are enough. Right now. In this body. With these needs. With this history. You are whole. complete, and worthy of every good thing you want. And learning to believe that, learning to live as if that's true, begins with the small, radical act of treating yourself as if you matter. That's the work. That's the revolution. That's what it means to be truly unshakable.